Gore is a depiction / visual of extremely violent, bloody, and profane imagery that expels shock from the viewer. Gore has been popularized with the rise of the internet and anonymity, with shock sites like LiveLeak being far and wide across the internet. It can be a sick and twisted outlet for some, yet the majority deems gore as deplorable, rightfully so. Yet a quote from Bridget Rubenking and Annie Lang sums up people's infatuation with this genre. Disgust, it is argued here, makes us feel bad, but it has functionally evolved over time to compel our attention, thus making it a quality of entertainment messages that may keep audiences engrossed and engaged. Gore plays a key role in many pieces of media, horror movies being at the forefront, with subgenres like splatter films making a big debut in people's hearts. But as of recent times, gore has surpassed its limits of horror movies and niche splatter films and has submerged its way into other means of media, which brings us to today's topic. Jujika no Rokunin, written by Nakatake Shiru, is a manga that was serialized in Kodansha's Shonen magazine for March to October of 2020, it being classified by the Western anime community as a new-gen manga series, with it having a 7.07 rating on MyAnimeList, which to most anime fans details it as a mediocre to decent anime. Yet, most of the reviews are extremely negative. So, what makes this manga one of the most hated new gens of our time? Jujika no Rokunin takes place with the main character, Iruma Shun, being severely bullied by 5 of his classmates, then picking on, beating up, strangling, and even labeling him Test Subject A, all with the purpose to try and make him kill himself. I know, fucked up little brats, but that isn't the worst of it, as Shigoku Kyo, the main antagonist and leader of the bullies, hatches the most evil part of his plan, pushing Madoka Hiro, one of his bully henchmen for lack of a better term, off of a cliff in front of the Iruma family's car, which contains Shun's father, mother, and brother, Kakeru, killing his mom and dad in the process. Madoka and Kyo find the last one alive, Kakeru, in the back seat, beating him within an inch of his life. Shun goes to live with his Gramps, Shun Sr. I know, it's stupid, but he's known as Gramps the whole story. Shun attempts to steal his grandfather's gun to get revenge on the boys who took his family away, Gramps telling him he would be caught before he could do anything, and his history with the Kitayama court, telling Shun he will train him to get revenge on his bullies flawlessly. We then cut to 4 years later in the future, Shun trained and ready to enact his revenge on his detractors. This all being in the first chapter. As far as most were concerned, this baseline plot had insane potential to be a staple anime, with its revenge plotline making us hate the antagonists and the popularity of revenge within anime and manga. So, where did it all go wrong? Before we answer that question, I think it's only fair to the fans, including myself, and author of this series, to go over some of the things that this series, to many, does right, as how would it even be published and given a rating higher than a lot of other manga if it was just pure torture? As far as many are concerned, people label Jujika no Rokunin as a one-dimensional manga that is solely for the purpose of torture. While I personally disagree to a varying level, as I do believe that up to 30 to 50% of the gore and violence in this manga serves no more purpose than shock value, some of the methods in Jujika no Rokunin are sophisticated, requiring more than just a Google search of torture methods, and needing some research to understand the anatomy of how these methods would work and how they could be drawn. Many point to chapters 33 to 34, where Iruma captures Madoka and uses a torture method known as thumb crushing, using a tool known as a thumbkin / thumb screw, a method used in early modern Europe, developed later than the 16th century. This method requiring at least some research, and this point in general is one that a lot of detractors of this show blow over and then go on to generalize the show as a sloppy, torture, gory mess. Art is a standard for manga, and many believe this art style perfectly fits the manga. The panel in chapter 56 of the manga shocked fans, seeing Shun's facial expression twist with Kuga's blood plastered across his face and body. After repeatedly smashing his head in with a cinder block, this panel demonstrates his lack of control in that moment, which contrasts with Shun's normal blank expression he wears normally in the series. It shows his determination for revenge against those who wronged him, giving an added side to his character instead of just the text bubbles that were saying he was determined. For many, myself included, the enjoyability of a manga or anime goes a long way. As a matter of fact, it distinguishes some good anime from the greats. For instance, my favorite show, Hunter x Hunter, might not be as well written as a show like Attack on Titan, but Hunter x Hunter has more of an enjoyment value to me. Now, I'm not saying fans of this series enjoy the unnecessary gore and rope in this show, I'll even get to that in the next section, but needless to say, the satisfaction of Shun getting back at those who wronged him, the people we hated from the start, or moments like Gramps coming in and saving Shun are genuinely satisfaction-filled moments to many because of how much we were told to dislike these characters, which made the revenge feel more than warranted. Those only being the main few out of many things people enjoy about this series, I think it's about time to get to the real meat and potatoes of this video. Although I've openly admitted to being a fan of this series to some degree, I know I have pretty low standards, that fact alone does not mean the manga is good by any means. If anything, I share criticisms of this manga with the people who think it's bad. Starting off, this being my main criticism of the series and the main reason why the accusation of Jujika being nothing more than torture has value to it, that being the excessive mentions and depictions of rope. There are 3 main depictions of rope in the series, all being unnecessary. Wow, Jujika 0 for 3? That's based as fuck. In chapters 29 and 30, Madoka ropes Shirakawa and leaves her traumatized and half nude for Shun to find her mere moments after. This scene doesn't add much aside from fueling Shun's already fueled rage, and if you wanted to make the point that this moves the plot along, speeding up Shun's process to kill Madoka, in chapter 24 Madoka and Shun had already met, Shun almost instinctively attacking him if Shirakawa didn't step in. So what does the scene add? Depth to Shirakawa's character? Not really. She's depressed and destroyed for a while, which gives a reason for her to leave the series while Aruma kills Kuga, but she didn't really need to be gone for that. She wouldn't have been there either way. It really only gives a reason for Aruma to sleep with her in chapter 62 to overwrite her memories, which, to be fair, opens Shun's eyes to the evil and the way he needs to overcome evil, but once again, it didn't really need to happen. Now the second situation is even more lackluster to many, because it literally did nothing at all. In chapter 50, Aruma fights Kuga judo style and ends up coming out on top. Shun would then tie him up to a hook over a barrel filled with water and carnivorous man shrimp, which, I mean, holy shit, I thought the pair of anguish was bad. But I think you can expect what happens next. Aruma leaves the building to grab cleanup supplies. Gramps wouldn't be there this time, so he had to dispose of Kuga himself. That time, Kuga's girlfriend Anna came in and saved him. She was in close proximity as Aruma tried to protect her from Kuga. She and Kuga had hid in a tool shed nearby, and then in a hallucinogenic state from the pain, he believes that Anna is Shigoku Kyo, or at least resembles him. He would then go on to rape her, going on to relive his intentions to do the same to Kyo himself. Kuga would kill Anna in the process. After noticing Kuga's absence, Aruma opened the shed door to find a beaten, bloodied, and dead Anna, mourning her loss in rage and despair, blaming himself for not being there, allowing Kuga to get the jump on him. This part of the scene was totally useless to the story, and it doesn't even drive Shun to a rage. As a matter of fact, Shun goes into a rage state, killing Kuga, but not because he raped and killed Anna, because he said something about Shigoku Kyo, which reminded Aruma that he needed to kill him, and he couldn't die there. Many argue that even when they had the chance to make the scene matter, even when it could have had some significance to the story, it just simply wasn't used. Which shows that it was purely for shock value, and he could have killed Anna, no rope, and it probably would have had the same effect. Finally, our third situation, Sakuraba Karen, the girlfriend, and I'm using that term very loosely, of Ushiro Yuga, one of Aruma's former bullies. And why I use that term loosely is due to the fact that Karen would be locked up in a house and constantly for months on end in chapter 7. And you may be asking, well, why? Just so she could develop a hate and wish to kill Yuga, which, in the grand scheme of things, is totally useless to the story. Once again, adding nothing. If anything, she contradicts that notion by killing herself before she can even see him die or kill him herself. In all, Jujika has an extreme flaw with its female leads, putting them into dire situations for Aruma to save them or attempt to every time, making it repetitive and arguably insensitive to actual victims. Moving on to a less grim topic, Chapter 93 of this manga is a very big complaint that is prominent in the talk surrounding it. A lot of the criticism directed towards this chapter is the amnesia that affects our protagonist. Mind you, this amnesia has yet to be explained and sort of just happened. Detractors believe that him losing his way is an annoying setback to the manga and doesn't have a real reason as to why it happened. Despite this, it isn't uncommon for PTSD victims to suffer from some form of partial or complete memory loss. Personally, I don't agree that it was an annoying setback, because he gained his memory back no more than 10 chapters later. Despite that factor, why would he even have amnesia if it would be resolved 10 chapters later? Mind you, nothing significant happened in the said 10 chapters. The reviews for this manga are far and wide, every other of the lot being negative. Then again, only half of them are forwards with any form of confidence and are just shitting on the series from a personal standpoint, or vice versa. The latter, not being wrong, but then claiming it as an objective view, is. Despite that, I've picked out a few that I agree with from both sides. The characters and plot were a letdown. The art itself is really good, however, the way the story utilizes female characters is horrible. The storyline has unnecessary romance, and the way it portrays is disgusting. The story only uses its female character for plots, and in the end, the main character saves her. The situations are too repetitive, and the women in the situation always seem unaffected by what has happened to them, and just fawn over the main character for saving them rather than being distraught over the situation. Overall, would not recommend, and I was really disappointed with the story. I found this while looking for a new horror manga to try, and the first chapter drew me in. It appeared to be setting up a compelling revenge story based around complex characters in a morally gray world. My first impression was wrong. This is not horror, it's torture porn. The issue is not the violence and gore. I can enjoy when that story calls for extreme imagery. The issue is every plot development unfolding in an incredibly contrived way to put a character in a situation where they are about to be raped or tortured. Events never unfold in a logical or interesting way. Characters just teleport around to the next place where they can star in an extended torture sequence that usually takes up an entire chapter or even two before returning to the actual plot. Strangely enough, there's also an extremely out-of-place romance subplot throughout it that is totally at odds with the actual plot. The only overlap of the B-plot and the revenge story is when the romantic interest finds a way to almost get every few chapters so the MC can come and save her. The premise is decent and the art is actually pretty good which elevates it slightly, but after the first chapter the story is a complete mess. Maybe you'll enjoy this if you're a wannabe who wants to fantasize about torturing their former bullies, or you get off the torture imagery. Otherwise, steer clear. It's a shame that this really had potential to be more than just aforementioned torture porn, but it decided to go in a batshit crazy direction and not in a good way. Things take such insane and sudden twists that it becomes counterintuitively hilarious. I feel bad for snickering as they went into depth, well if there ever was any, teach the bullies in turn, and on every single one of them they are revealed to be as silent patient levels of deranged ruckus. Disclaimer to anyone reading, I don't think bullying or violence is anything to ever be laughed at, but instead I feel like the character writing is so cheap that it's hard to take these ultra dramatic events seriously. The word I'm hunting for is edgy. It feels like I'm peering into the mind of someone with a heavy history behind being bullied, and they're going at their bullies in the most on-the-nose way possible. Not so much writing a proper story, but a thinly veiled, ultra-violent daydream. I was initially drawn into the manga on the premise that the main character's war criminal grandfather was going to train him into a killing machine, which is initially what I got. That seemed like a nice start to build a complex and mature narrative, maybe struggle with the idea that one of the two bullies had a change of heart, but no. The mangaka doesn't want to tackle any of these intriguing subjects, and thus my interest was waning chapter by chapter. What keeps me reading so far is practically my addiction to the stories of self-growth and endless training montages, not to mention that I want to know more about his grandfather and how he came to be such a menace. Art was alright, could be better, could be worse, some panels had a nice sense of flow to them. TLDR, I feel that the characters are so one-note that Aruma's revenge becomes repetitive and thus really bland. It feels made to measure for those harboring any revenge fantasies themselves. While this itself doesn't mean anything, it does cheapen the story in terms of boiling characters down to evil archetypes, denying any interesting development. Women are reduced to mere plot devices. I'll be following how the story proceeds, but won't hold high hopes for it.
It bothers you, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, that's because you think too much about what others think of you.
Despite all I've mentioned about the good and bad of this series, I enjoyed the peaks of this manga, but the lows destroyed my confidence in it to be anything more than an edgy 7 out of 10. I understand the viewpoints of people who believe that this manga is deplorable, and frankly agree with some of their points. I try to represent the gray area, as the two sides are either people who dislike gore and believe that the author is a projecting psycho, or those who don't have any deeper understanding of the series and what it could mean, simply arguing for it because Aruma is cool and a badass. I understand the flaws of this manga through and through, and frankly I'm hoping that Nakatake will pull through and can save the massive amounts of potential the story held. Toning down the use of female roles, like how he tried to in the most recent arc, and making the moment that Aruma and Kyo face off more complex than the lackluster writing of all the prior bullies in their demise. In all, I still hold hope in the potential of this show, if the author takes time to consider feedback from its audience, although I doubt anything will change and Nakatake will continue this repetitive streak, which will result in me and many others to drop the series. A lot of the problems that people have with this manga are unreasonable. Mostly the dislike of gore is one of the main detractions against this manga, yet some of the criticisms about this series are perfectly valid. Throughout the manga, it has had its ups and downs, the start having massive potential for it to develop into a mediocre, heavily criticized extended plotline. Jujika had a lot of criticism levied its way, some rightfully so. Whether you believe that Jujika no Rokunin is a deplorable shit show that was written poorly by a madman for the sake of torture porn, or whether you believe that it was an over-the-top depiction of gore with good plot and enjoyable moments, I'm not here to tell you which to believe, as sometimes there can be gray areas. It's bigger than black and white, as they say. On the other hand, this world is a muddy one. However, there are two things that are clear to me. They are good, and those are evil. But in all, I've been salty, condoning Jujika no Rokunin. Until next time, fuck this manga.